Good afternoon. My name is Alex Duggan, and on behalf of Blue Skyre IBE, I am so pleased to welcome you to today's webinar, Innovative Solutions for CRE and FM. So just a couple quick housekeeping notes. We are recording today's session and happy to share the link so you can watch on demand after today. There will be time at Q&A for your questions, but if you have anything that you want to know or a point that you'd like to make, feel free to enter them into the comments. We would love to hear from you throughout the session. And now it is my pleasure to welcome today's lead presenter, Maureen Ehrenberg. Maureen is co-founder and CEO of Blue Skyre IBE. She's also an internationally recognized real estate industry business leader. Her expertise lies in business process transformation and strategic positioning of the management, leasing, and operations of large complex portfolios. Maureen has experience in leading, repositioning, and doubling the size of 3 of the leading global real estate facilities outsourcing businesses. She also serves as an advisor and board member to global organizations, investors, and real estate technology providers with more than 25 years of experience. She has deep experience providing real estate advice and services to companies globally. Maureen, thank you so much for leading today's session.
Oh, well, thanks, Alex, and thanks for the invitation. And I'd also like to welcome David Flynn, who's joining me. And he's also one of the co-founders of Blue Skyre with Colette Temminck and myself and Neil Civi. And David is our Chief Operating Officer. And we're going to be walking through some of the really dynamic changes that we're seeing in the industry right now and looking forward to the discussion.
Great. And I think to get started, we have a quick video to introduce Blue Skyre.
We are Blue Skyre, innovating the built environment. Our name speaks to our commitment to sustainability. Blue is for Earth, the bright blue marble is seen from space. Skyre is Gaelic for bright and glittering. We believe sustainability influences the continuation of life on Earth. Everyone is responsible for how they impact the environment, and their behavior is usually a matter of awareness. Commercial real estate is our profession. Studies show that buildings account for almost 40% of emissions. That means we can directly influence sustainability by making building owners and operators aware of their role in reducing emissions. For that reason, ESG and sustainability is Blue Skyre's key consulting service. Our 6-step process helps clients create a practical ESG and sustainability program that addresses energy consumption, building materials, water usage, and waste management, measures that can cut emissions by 20% or more. Sustainability is our purpose and built into our name. We are Blue Skyre, innovating the built environment for change.
Well, thank you. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you're able to join us today. And what we thought we would do is just start out with talking about some of the key changes that are occurring. And Alex, I'm hoping you can help me because I'm having trouble advancing the slide.
Yep, no problem.
Thank you. So what we've done is we've looked at the 5 key trends that we're seeing in real estate. And David, I think just from your perspective, when you look at this, if you had to frame this up from a real estate perspective, what would you say have been the backdrop to these 5 trends?
Yeah, as we talk about real estate, like over the years, we've seen a number of trends emerge, but what I think are the fundamental trends to everything that we're seeing happening is, number 1, technology. Number 2 is infrastructure, having better infrastructure. And 3 is sustainability, improving the environment through carbon reduction, renewable energy, waste management. Those are what I think are the 3 key fundamental trends that we're seeing in real estate.
Yeah, and what's interesting is, people talk about these 3 different economies, and I believe the easiest way to look at the 5 key trends is to look at them through different lenses. And some people talk about an experience economy, and they'll talk about a technology or digital economy, and then, of course, the shared economy. And when we look at these through those different lenses, they mean different things within the context of that economy. So if you think about the experience economy, when you start looking at what it means for organizational talent, whether it's taking a much more holistic approach and looking at not only health and well-being, convenience, equity, inclusion, a sense of belonging in your workplace, whether you're remote or you're there. And then you start looking at transformation. ESG tends to be a theme across all the three different economies, because the whole concept here is that most organizations are going through some type of transformation. David, I think to respond to the areas you're talking around technology and around infrastructure, certainly, and then around sustainability. And so one of the key challenges is really to operationalize your new and changing focus that has to be very dynamic depending on what initiatives and priorities you're driving at that time. And then when you look at trust means different things depending, again, on that lens. And in an environment that is experiential, some of that is just the ability for teams to work together very collaboratively. But ultimately, that means a lot of remote work, distance working. It could be teams working from different regions of the world, and that ability to know that the work is getting done, when it's getting done, how it's being delivered, working with clients in a very different way is really a huge impact on organizations today. Technology, we've talked about that. It's a driver that takes new ways of doing things and innovation, and they actually can take very complex things and automate it. And that is a massive, not only time saver, but it really pushes growth for any organization and for an economy. And then ultimately through the teams, as we're talking, the emergence of so many different working models that, call them hybrid, if you will. They're really the new way of working and the new culture of work. But with that is driving different types of portfolio occupancy. And then if we shift lenses and talk a little bit about a shared economy, what this means is much more inclusion. And so it can be talent that's far more dynamic. They might not be employees of the company, but your ability to hire the best talent for the project and people to be able to have experiences working across organizations in an engaged way. So it's very exciting that these trends are taking on such a different way of meaning, depending on the economy type, all the way down to when you start talking about a digital economy, a tech economy. Again, your talent's familiarity, the training with the tools, information security, the transformation that's occurring through introduction of new tools. Each one of these areas, the ability to team differently, whether it's video conferencing, remote work, you're using co-working and different types of work models within your own spaces. Each one of them need really the thought process through how you're managing the real estate, how you're thinking about your portfolio and your occupancy strategy, and then how you're managing your ESG. So we can move on to the next slide. And what we've done is we've created these different solutions to respond. And we're going to talk a little bit about these because the whole idea behind the whole, the work and what we're seeing put forward, not only needs from our clients, but through colleagues in the industry. And I'm excited about some of the people who are attending the webinar because these are people, some that we're very closely engaged with regarding the change. And part of the change in general, when you talk about a shared economy, is different groups participating and working together, not necessarily in the same organization. So we're seeing a huge emergence of channel partners. What it's also allowing is opportunity for smaller firms to engage in areas where in the past they've been blocked out, and sourcing groups starting to buy things in different ways. And with all of that, it creates impact within the local communities that organizations are working in, and there's impact just regarding different ESG initiatives that they can drive through looking at that. So the strategic advisory component is key here. We'll talk about the other tools, but I think if we just go on to the next slide, we can talk a little bit about what the strategic advisory component entails. When people are looking at their built environment models and what it is that they're trying to change, David, what do you think really is foremost in people's minds today when we're talking with different teams and groups, whether they're consultants, advisors, service providers, end users?
It's the dynamism that's happening here. Having an operating model that can be flexible and agile enough to shift or flex with the dynamic environment that we're in. Like just looking at, say, valuation of a building. Its pricing of the space, being able to to come up with new methods of pricing and valuing based upon how the space is now being used. It's all a factor in how to address the space and how it's being used, and addressing user experience, sustainability, expertise, capturing and analyzing data. It's all that is really important that people are looking at for our operating model.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I find it absolutely fascinating right now that when you look at different groups along the value chain in real estate, whether it's a private equity investor, whether it is a pension fund, whether it is a service provider, an owner occupant, there are several key themes that are running through that today that have not run through in the past. And it goes everything from how you're evaluating and putting a return on everything from an investment in renewable energy, which before used to just literally be, what is my return? What is my payback? While that is still important, prioritizing that amongst your other ESG initiatives to see where you have areas that need more focus, and then areas where you really need to kind of change the way you are operating in order to integrate that within your systems. And so when I say systems, it really are the systems of the people and the process of the tools. It's tracking each one of those. And so what the major trend is that we're seeing, and in response to that, is looking at someone's existing organization and how they're working, and assessing not only the organization, but then the tools that they're using, the way they're approaching it, and then factoring in what some of the gaps are between leading industry trends, where it is they're trying to go, and then how do they re-equip. And the fundamental underlying rationale behind many of the adjustments that organizations are taking are really very much focused on looking at the way they operate today versus how would they reconstitute their operations to take the approach they have towards sustainability in the environment, towards their social, societal, community impact, and then looking at the governance and compliance, which today is coming down to be something that's going to be far more auditable and accountable for the data you're reporting and the initiatives you're reporting. And how do you really embed that within all of your existing systems, whether it's the way you're applying technology, the way you're buying things, the way you're taking care of your equipment for resiliency, life cycle capital planning, and then making that a repeatable process, a managed process, so you have far more consistency amongst the portfolio. So as a result of that, we've developed a tool that, David, I'd like you to walk through this next slide on ESG Focus and how we're going about.
Sure. Yeah. We've as we've broken down the ESG challenge and how to solve for it in 6 basic steps. First is, what is the structure of the corporation, and how does a team structure fit within that corporate structure in order to be certain that there's alignment on the ESG goals and objectives. And then we move into identifying those goals and objectives. It's based upon the materiality assessment, but by doing that materiality assessment is what will qualify the initiatives that one selects. And then going into prioritizing those initiatives, which ones will move the needle the most to be able to reach the ESG goal that the company has, and that the team or the real estate team has been given in order to help achieve the corporate strategy. And then the fourth is implementing the plan. Important next step is measuring it, and then of growing critical importance is reporting. And there we see so much more importance being put on that by lenders, by investors, by customers. And the SEC will be issuing this probably in the second quarter, at least it looks like by the middle of the year, reporting guidelines for companies so that they can just issue a strategy statement and then think they're done. It's got to be quantified with reliable information. So that whole supply chain, that whole value chain in ESG is now under scrutiny, and there's so much improvement that's needed in order to reach those two goals of being able to measure performance and also reporting.
Great, thanks. And then the tool itself, if we go on to the next slide, it's really fascinating. We were able to partner with a company called Alivance that has one of the leading scientific-based prioritization and quantification tools for making decisions on projects. And we created a proprietary approach, ESG Focus, that we're using Alivance to power the tool. But this is literally a tool where you can take your strategy or initiatives and use the scientific approach using pairwise comparisons to go through and compare. And then it helps teams. You can have very dispersed teams entering initiatives or ideas and suggestions. So there's a collaboration component, but in the end, there's far more transparency and then also weighting around which initiatives you're choosing to go with. And what's interesting here is, we talked about a lot about the ability to be very flexible and agile. And ultimately, you're considering all three dimensions. And very often an organization, it's easy to quantify dollars and cents. But as we said, there's a whole new equation around what's the return on some of these initiatives. You've got so much capital that is really limited in, each year. And so where you put these priorities is so important. And given the fact that you're going to be rated and graded on where it is that you're focusing and your priorities that you're taking, this tool really helps you determine when projects come up, the weighting on them for your consideration. Next slide, please.
It really helps move the needle, Maureen. It helps you identify what's going to move the needle.
Exactly. Siri Passport is it's really an approach that we've developed, and it's really a tool that what we've done is, when we go back to this idea that organizations now need to stand up and operationalize, there are many companies today that operate in a very disparate way due to the nature of their business. Some of it is due to the fact that there's been tremendous M&A. Some organizations focus on buying operating companies and letting those operating companies operate independently. Many have just different operations around the world or within a country that operate independently for many reasons. And yet there's a need now to connect those dots to understand the data, understand the processes, and bring some sort of consistency around the operationalization, at least how they're collecting the data and understanding what's occurring at each remote site or within remote businesses. And so what Siri Passport does is really allows you to connect the dots and fill in the gaps by deploying different tools. These are technology tools, processes, and subject matter expertise to come in back behind a team. And once they've got their strategy and they know the things that they're trying to solve for, it gives them a much more agile approach with little capital investment required. And our team is able to help them really transition and mobilize and can support them on an ongoing basis. So they can operate as though they're one big operation, but they can still operate independently. It's going to be the workflow processes and the way things are either scheduled, the way they're expedited, the way they're captured, that brings the consistency to process despite different operations. So we feel this is going to be critically important, and we're beginning to see more and more platforms as a service. And these platforms, whether they're tech platforms and process platforms, they all kind of work to achieve the same kind of thing, which is allowing an organization a much more advanced way to operate. And an analogy to this is, we've seen so much change in real estate. This impact now is happening in the office and industrial. But for all of us, we've seen this happening in retail, and we've seen this happen in the home market for years. And when you look at what's happened to retail, where retail had a shift and change, the same sort of changes, and it's all based on tech, the same sort of changes are now happening in these other property types. And we believe that over time, some of these platform models are going to become leading platforms, as we've seen, whether it's selling homes or renting homes or engaging in online retail. So it's a very exciting change for commercial real estate. And I think we're in the early innings here, but over time, this model is going to continue to develop and thrive. Next slide, please. And then ultimately, Synergy Park Hub. We've created a platform tool. This is really a data cube. And what this allows organizations to do is take all of the different systems, their spaghetti networks of tools, whether they're operating in Excel, they've got a lease administration system, they've got rent roll systems, the different systems that they're utilizing. What's typical in real estate, as we all know, unless you're using one very large enterprise system or you're using one fully integrated IWMS, you still have a lot of data points that are out there that you're trying to pull together, whether it's across sites or across services or across geographies. But what's new and happening is the need for other information to come into this for decision making. And whether it's doing an overlay to understand climate change and how that's impacting your occupied portfolio and places where you're choosing to occupy, whether it's storm threats and weather threats, whether it's other types of situations that are going on a global basis, bringing in different data points and overlaying that to create one single pane of glass to understand what is happening, where things are going well, and maybe whether you've got some signals on things that need addressing that morning when you come in, or that happening, and you can start to see perhaps whether there's a change happening, or you've had some sort of an outage, or you've got a large number of work orders. You can really begin to assess and dig into the data to understand how all those pieces come together. And more, whether you're working with different service providers or you've got different vendors beneath, the ability to bring all that data together and analyze it can be very costly. And this is a way, it's a much more cost-effective way to integrate those systems and really create almost like a virtual IWMS with other data points coming in to create a dynamic system. So I think we'll leave it there. I really would love to open it up to see if there's questions or discussion with the group.
If you have any questions for Maureen or David, they'd love to hear from you. We have a few minutes before we wrap up. I saw a couple folks with their hand raised. If you want to go ahead and enter your question in the chat, we'd love to hear from you.
And, you know, Alex, it's funny when we talk about this kind of connection between what the operating model is and what the basic priorities, whether it's ESG or these trends we're talking about around experience, around valuation. To me, I'm very interested to know what others think about the valuation impact, because if we think about a traditional building, whether it's an investment property or an occupied site, the fact that the occupancy itself is changing, and now we're beginning to see trends where investment dollars are going to go. If the property is challenged from a sustainability perspective or other initiatives that were not part of the consideration several years ago, we knew buildings sometimes that had a higher LEED certification could command higher rents due to the green leases and the certification. But now with some of the organizations cracking down on being certification ready rather than being certified, or buildings that are challenged beneath those certifications, it looks as though the valuation and the investment appetite is going to change pretty rapidly here in the next couple of years, and is changing already. And that's going to impact value from not only investor perspective, but just from a management perspective of do you stick for the long term and do an adaptive reuse or change it, or do you exit now and look for another site? So it'd be interesting to hear other people's thoughts on that.
Sure, a lot of considerations for sure. So Maureen and David, we do have a couple questions about Synergy Park. One question is, for the Synergy Park Hub, about how long does it take to set up?
It could take anywhere from 3 to 6 months, and that goes back to the spaghetti network. So literally what we're doing with customers that are trying to combine the data is looking at the quality of their data and then the amount of data and how it's been organized. Because the key is, if the systems are there, we can help to rationalize, make sure the data is at least in a fashion that it can be standardized to some extent and pulled together. So the lead time does take, it could take 3 to 4 months, up to 6 months. And then on top of that, we can continue to build. So you can start from a basis and then add other systems as you like. But it really is, you look at some of the large service providers have some solutions like that as well that are their own systems. We like to look at ours as a little bit, ours is neutral. So we don't have the conflicts that we can, we're actually able to bring in other groups' data and use it really as a performance management and measurement tool that we believe can be very helpful in it, regardless of where you're coming from.
Great, thank you.
And then another factor affecting that is getting the approvals for the connections, the integration of the different points of technology. That can take some time.
And then you somewhat touched on this in your answer just now, but to expand on that, we had another question about, if you could maybe give a practical example of the Passport or Synergy Park hub in terms of output.
Sure, they're very different tools. So in a nutshell, the Passport tool is an operating tool. It is a way to operationalize your portfolio. So if you think about when you outsource to a services provider, you're looking for that provider to bring their platform to you. And then also, obviously, there's a heavy level of self-performance and other attributes. What this would be if your existing operation needs type of transformation. It is a way of getting the benefits of outsourcing without outsourcing per se. So what you're bringing is you're making sure the CMMS is operating right. If there's any smart building components, are you using remote access? What is the least information that should go in there? And so it's literally standing up an operating platform, whereas Synergy Park is really a performance management tool, looking at what is happening across the portfolio, recording the data, and then it's really kind of a live view over time of what is happening day to day. So one's a reporting and management measurement tool. The other one is an operating platform.
And the Passport platform also is, the client is in charge. They aren't outsourcing any decision making. They aren't losing control. They get to keep control. They mitigate risks. They keep the cost savings. It augments the client's existing staff.
That's it. Well, anyway, I am so grateful for those who joined us today, and very thankful for you taking time out to hear about what we're up to and what we're doing. And hope you found it interesting, some of these insights that we've shared with what we're seeing. And I'm sure many of you are seeing some of the same things, and we're trying to help solve for some of these issues in the field with new solutions that are somewhat disruptive in nature, but we believe are going to be kind of the ongoing shifts and change that are happening. So thanks again, and hope you have a great rest of the week.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Great session.